How many times has this happened to you in your solo queue games? You walk out of base to start pushing out a side wave, and just as soon as you do, your team walks up mid and dies. Maybe you're playing jungle, you notice some of your camps are up, so you start clearing them. Then your team walks up mid and dies. Or maybe you're playing support, you base because an objective's coming up soon, and you need wards for it. And then, well, I guess by now you can probably guess what happens next. Throughout my time coaching League, this is the number one problem that most of my students have, especially those playing in lower ranks. That's why I came up with the concept of tempo lines, which is a great way of thinking about the game so you always know where to go and what to do in order to make sure your team stops inting and so you never miss out on the action. But before we start with the video, I'd like to announce something I'm pretty excited for. I've started my own Patreon, where I'll be posting the recordings of all of my best coaching sessions in full. Right now, there's already a pretty expansive library of videos up that I'll be adding to every day, covering all roles and ranks, including a couple of sessions with Grandmaster players, pro players, and even pro team scrims. I've also moved my How Pros Think series over to Patreon as well. It wasn't performing that well on YouTube, so if you like the series, that's where you'll find it going forward. As always, thank you so much for your support, and if you want to check it out, it'll be linked in the video description below. My name's Rogue, and I played League of Legends professionally for 7 years. Now I'm a full-time content creator and coach for all ranks, Iron through to Challenger. So if you want more information of what a coaching session with me will look like, you can find more information by following the link in the video description below. After 15 minutes when the laning phase is over and first tower's fallen, we can start to think about the game using tempo lines. Here's how you do it. Look at the minimap and draw a line on each of your teammates that spans the entire distance of the map. These are your tempo lines. To put it simply, when you're sharing a tempo line with someone, you're playing with them. And if one of you dies, the other one is always going to be able to get something for it. In a perfect world, your entire team is on the same line. But right now, blue team has 3 different tempos. If Leona and Cannon, who are in the front tempo line, begin a fight right now, the teammates in the further back tempos won't be able to get anything for it, because they're not on the same line. Now compare this freeze frame with a different one like this, where we have all 5 team members on the same line. You can see this in effect. While the enemy is trying to deal with Cannon, the other 4 teammates capitalize on this by pushing out bot and mid waves, and then eventually getting the enemy mid tower. Our problems only begin when we aren't on the same tempo line as our teammates. And this was the crucial mistake that the 3 players from the intro had made. They all left their teammates alone in the front tempo, in a position where they could die without someone to ensure them. Catching sideways, doing jungle camps, or recalling are all things that put you further back on the map, and when you have teammates who are on a far up tempo, this is a recipe for disaster, especially in lower ranks. Now let's put this all to action and show some real-world examples on how you should use tempo lines to adjust your gameplay. In this replay, we'll be looking through the eyes of a Rengar jungle, who at the moment is 11-2. Now, off the back of the pretty understandable mistake, he respawns, and of course when you die, you're left with some pretty interesting tempo lines. His tempo lines look like this. Rengar's entire team is on the other side of the map, in a very compromising position. Now, logic dictates that they would play safe until their 11 till Rengar comes to support them, but that's not what they're going to do. We have to compensate. We have to get into the front tempo as fast as we can. We don't have time to farm. If you leave the game up to your teammates when you're fed, they're going to feed. The only correct decision here is to instantly run out of base and join them, because we'll see in a moment what our Rengar player actually does, is he goes and clears some camps. And at the moment that the enemy shows up to kill our teammates who are playing aggressively in that front tempo, let's place ourselves hypothetically in the same tempo line as Draven here. Doesn't matter where Rengar is along this line, he's always going to get something. If he's here close to bot, he has a choice. He can either decide to help Draven and trade back some kills for his teammate's mistake, or he could choose to engage on Yasuo now that he sees 3 people bot. Even if he's top lane, he has the ability to go for a pick and then potentially trade a tower for Draven's life. In this way, we're always ensuring our teammates. It's very important when you're the fed member that you don't leave the game up to your teammates. If you're in the back tempo, get into the front tempo as fast as possible. Now, whilst these tempo lines apply to all of your teammates, you should pay much more attention to the tempo lines of teammates who are doing well. It's unrealistic in solo queue to always have 5 people together, so instead make sure you're sharing the line with your strongest members. These stronger members are going to apply more pressure and be better to fight alongside. And this point becomes very important when you remember that tempo lines work both ways, meaning your teammates could also be insurance for your mistakes when they share your tempo line. And a teammate who is strong will have a much better chance to capitalize off of this than one who isn't doing so well. It's very important that you recognize that these tempo lines work both ways. In this replay, for example, my team has just finished Baron and then recalled, but I'm the first person out of base. So this is an example of where I'm in the front tempo with my team behind me. So this situation isn't the greatest because I can't do something like run up mid and start a fight, since I don't have the support of my team, but it does give us some options of what we can do. Whilst we don't want to fight when alone in the front tempo, we get to do other things like clear jungle camps, recall if we need to, or push out a side wave without fear that our team is going to die. And especially now that our Aurelion Sol is recalled, these are the tempo lines that my team has. Now, if I was to do something like try and split push down this bot tower, that would put me in a very far up tempo line without the support of my team, which is never something that I want to do. My death here would just be feeding, not split pushing. So instead, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to fold back into the previous tempo by walking mid and joining my team on their tempo line. You see that done just here. I push my bot wave, making use of that time where my team can't die without me, and instead of running up and trying to hit this tower and being overextended, I instead fall back to that tempo line of my teammates, and especially of my Aurelion Sol, who right now is extremely fed and 1v9ing the game. And now once my team is actually on the map, I've used that time to push out my waves, and we nicely have our entire team on one big long tempo. So now if I want to try and split push down that bot tower, we're going to accomplish something. The enemy is either going to be overextended attacking my team, and I can either fold in and help, or take the bot tower, and if the enemy commits resources to coming bot lane, my team will either help me, or get something somewhere else. Now looking at the difference between the tempo lines in the clip we just watched, and the Rengar clip from earlier in the video, it's now very clear the difference between these two situations. But the question is, which situation do you think is better? Well, coming out of base on a faster tempo than your team, like in that Kled replay, is always the ideal situation. It allows for us to farm the jungle if we want, push out a side lane, and create a split push threat without the risk of your teammates dying. Whilst in the Rengar replay, we have to drop all notions of correct macro and optimal farming in favor of getting in the front tempo and taking random fights with our team. Our Kled player, on the other hand, had the free time to push out a side wave, create a split push threat, force an enemy to answer him, and then rotate into mid with a flank and a numbers advantage that he created by being in the front tempo. So how do we make sure we're spending as much time as possible in the front tempo? Well, there's a few ways. Firstly, teleport and some global ultimates let you break all of the rules. And this is the main strength of a spell like teleport and solo queue. It allows you to catch waves in a far back tempo with your teammates far up on the map, because at a moment's notice, you can always join them if needed. The most important thing though is to not die. After respawning, you will always have terrible tempo lines, and be forced to skip camps and side waves to instead try and run up mid just to cover for your team. But basing as fast as possible after a fight, or skipping bases altogether if you can, is probably the easiest improvement to implement that will keep you in the front tempo for longer, and give you time to farm and create advantages before your team comes on the map. In this final replay, we're going to see a really good example of the consequences that delaying our recalls and putting ourselves in that back tempo can have. Now to start off with, our Jarvan player is doing a really great job. He's playing on a similar tempo to most of his teammates, ends up getting a kill on the enemy Graves and taking a red buff. But now that we've done all that, we have to check our team's gold. Everyone needs to recall, especially our Jarvan player, who after taking red buff, has 2.8k base. Now if our Jarvan player had only 1000 gold, he could potentially justify sticking around here, keeping himself on that front tempo, and allowing himself to do some camps or maybe push out this top wave while he waits for his team. But with this much gold, we're just wasting time. Our teammates have already based and started running out, and we still haven't recalled. We've delayed it for absolutely no reason. And the consequences here are going to be seen in just a moment when our Jarvan player gets to base. We zoom out, and that Fiora, Rakan, and Ahri that we were just playing with in the same tempo moments ago are now so much further ahead than us. So now our Jarvan player, who has 6 camps up in his jungle, doesn't get to farm any of them. We have to go join in this front tempo. Now, of course, we don't in this situation, but there's a ton we miss out on. Our teammates are up here ready to go when the enemy Talia makes a massive mistake, face-checking into this jungle with zero vision. So does Kayle. All of the enemies are completely overextended here, and our teammates are ready to capitalize, and we're not finding the kills. But not even just that, this is probably the only way we could lose the game, is if we do something like leave these teammates who have massive shutdown gold unattended and they fight without us. Luckily our gold lead is enough that they win the fight, but it should still be something that we're a part of. But not even just that, the enemy kills our mid wave. Now this student asked me, why did this game go for so long from this point, the game going another 20 minutes? This is why. Delaying your recall allows the enemy to do things that they shouldn't, like go through their jungle and play swords, but most importantly, kill minion waves they shouldn't be allowed to kill. And our Jarvan player just simply isn't playing the game. Really, the key to having more control over the fate of your games is to spend more time in the front tempo. Now, this isn't the perfect macro you'd expect to see in a pro match, but it's realistic, and it's what you need to do when playing with unpredictable teammates in an environment as fast-paced as solo queue. League is a complex game, and if you want to continue to learn more pro-level macro that will help you win more in your games, then remember to subscribe, and consider leaving a like or a comment. It all helps out a ton with the YouTube algorithm. Thanks so much.